The title sounds like a huge promise. Every mental disorder and its effects, explained in 22 minutes. Obviously, humanity has documented hundreds of mental disorders, and explaining every single one would take roughly the length of several lifetimes and a very patient audience. So, what this really means is something more interesting. Instead of listing clinical textbook definitions until everyone falls asleep, we are looking at the strangest, most common and most misunderstood mental disorders, the ones that quietly shape human behavior every single day. The weird part, most of these conditions aren't just people acting strange. They're your brain, trying to solve problems in extremely unhelpful ways. Your brain is basically a hyperactive security guard with anxiety issues. When something feels dangerous, uncertain, or emotionally overwhelming, it starts pulling emergency levers. Sometimes those levers help, sometimes they produce panic attacks, obsessive rituals, emotional shutdowns, or hallucinations, which is why mental disorders often look bizarre from the outside, but make strange evolutionary sense on the inside. So today, we are diving into some of the most fascinating psychological glitches in the human operating system. Let's get right into it. Number 10. Anxiety disorder. Imagine your brain installs a smoke detector. Good idea, right? Now imagine that smoke detector goes off every time someone makes toast. Welcome to anxiety disorder. Anxiety is actually one of the most ancient survival systems humans have. It's designed to scan the environment for threats, predators, danger, social rejection, anything that might get you killed or kicked out of the tribe. When the system works normally, it's incredibly useful. You feel nervous before a dangerous situation. Your heart speeds up. Your brain becomes hyper alert. Congratulations, your survival software is working. But with anxiety disorders, the alarm system becomes wildly overprotective. Your brain starts treating everyday situations like life or death emergencies, walking into a room full of people, possible danger, sending a text message, social catastrophe incoming, your boss saying we should talk tomorrow. Congratulations, your nervous system has already planned your funeral. Physically, anxiety triggers the fight or flight response, heart pounding, muscles tightening, rapid breathing. Your body is literally preparing to escape a tiger, even though the real threat is just an email notification. Ironically, the brain thinks it's helping. It believes if it stays alert enough, it can prevent disaster, but instead, it traps you in a permanent state of mental overthinking. Basically, your brain hired a security guard who thinks every noise in the house is a home invasion. Number 9. Now imagine the opposite system malfunctioning. Instead of your brain being too alert, it suddenly decides that nothing matters anymore. That's depression, and it's not just feeling sad. Sadness is temporary. Depression is more like someone quietly lowering the brightness on your entire emotional display. Things that used to feel rewarding, food, hobbies, friends, achievements, suddenly feel strangely empty. Your brain stops producing normal levels of motivation and pleasure chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. It's like the reward system that normally says good job, keep going, suddenly goes completely silent. From the outside, depression can look like laziness, but internally, it feels more like trying to run a marathon while someone slowly drains the battery from your nervous system. Even simple tasks start feeling absurdly difficult. Getting out of bed, replying to messages, brushing your teeth. Your brain basically enters energy-saving mode. Some scientists think this response may have originally evolved as a way to force humans to withdraw and recover during overwhelming stress or loss. The problem is that in modern life, the shutdown sometimes gets stuck, which means your brain's attempt to protect you turns into a long-term emotional blackout. It's like the system tried to dim the lights for rest and accidentally turned the whole building off. Number 8. Picture leaving your house and suddenly thinking, did I lock the door? Totally normal thought. Now imagine that thought repeating 100 times until you physically walk back and check the lock again and again and again. That's the daily experience of obsessive-compulsive disorder. OCT works like a glitch in the brain's error detection system. Normally, your brain checks things once and then moves on. Door locked, good. Continue living your life. But with OCT, completion signal never arrives. The brain keeps sending the same warning message over and over again. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. To silence that alarm, the brain invents rituals: checking, counting, cleaning, arranging objects in very specific ways. These behaviors temporarily calm the anxiety, but only briefly. Soon the brain demands the ritual again and again, which turns everyday life into a loop of mental pop-up notifications you can't close. It's not about liking things neat or organized. It's about your brain refusing to accept that a task is finished. Basically, your mental operating system keeps pressing refresh on the same thought until you perform a ritual that satisfies it, which means your brain becomes the world's most annoying software. Bug point 1 that keeps asking, are you sure? Number 7. Ad. Picture trying to read a book while someone changes the TV channel in your brain every 7 seconds. That's a rough approximation of AD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is often described as a problem with attention, but that's slightly misleading. People with AD don't actually have less attention. They have less control over where the attention goes. Their brain is constantly scanning for stimulation, novelty, and anything even slightly interesting. If something isn't engaging enough, the brain simply refuses to stay on it. Homework, boring, taxes, extremely boring. A random 3-hour deep dive about how submarines work. Suddenly the brain is fully operational. The reason has a lot to do with dopamine, the brain chemical responsible for motivation and reward. AD brains often have a harder time regulating dopamine levels, which means boring tasks feel painfully unrewarding. So the brain starts chasing stimulation, like a raccoon digging through trash. This leads to classic symptoms: impulsiveness, distraction, hyperactivity, and occasionally forgetting what you walked into a room for while still standing in the doorway. But AD also has an upside. When something does capture attention, the brain can enter hyperfocus mode, where hours pass like minutes. So it's less like having a broken attention system, and more like owning a sports car with no steering wheel, incredible speed, questionable control. Number 6. Bipolar disorder. Now imagine your emotional thermostat is broken. Not slightly broken, completely shattered. Bipolar disorder is defined by extreme mood swings between mania and depression. During depressive episodes, everything slows down, energy drops, motivation disappears, the world feels heavy and colorless. But during manic episodes, the brain suddenly slams the accelerator. Sleep becomes optional. Ideas start firing at machine gun speed. Confidence skyrockets. Some people in manic states feel unstoppable, like their brain suddenly upgraded to a high-performance supercomputer. They might talk faster, think faster, take bigger risks, start huge projects, or feel overwhelming bursts of creativity. Historically, many artists, writers, and inventors are believed to have experienced manic phases where ideas poured out at incredible speed. But the downside is, severe mania can push people into dangerous decisions, reckless behavior, or emotional burnout. And eventually, the brain swings back toward depression again. Imagine riding a roller coaster, where the highest peaks feel incredible, but the drops are brutal. That's bipolar disorder. Your emotional engine keeps switching between maximum acceleration and total shutdown, which makes everyday life feel like trying to drive through a storm while someone randomly yanks the steering wheel. Number 5. Schizophrenia. Now we step into one of the most misunderstood mental disorders, schizophrenia. Pop culture loves to portray it as multiple personalities, which is completely wrong. Schizophrenia is actually a disorder of perception and reality processing. Your brain normally acts like a filter. It receives enormous amounts of sensory information, sights, sounds, thoughts, and organizes them into something that feels like a stable reality. Schizophrenia disrupts that filter. The brain begins mixing internal thoughts with external sensory signals. This can produce hallucinations, hearing voices, seeing things that aren't physically present, or delusions, where the brain builds elaborate explanations. For confusing signals, for example, a random coincidence might suddenly feel like a secret message meant specifically for you. The brain isn't going crazy. It's trying to interpret overwhelming signals without the normal filtering system. Imagine if every background noise, stray thought, and passing shadow demanded your full attention. All at once, your brain would eventually start building stories to explain the chaos. Schizophrenia is incredibly complex and still not fully understood, but it highlights something fascinating about the human brain. Reality isn't something we simply observe. It's something the brain constructs, and when that construction system breaks, the world itself can start behaving very strangely, which means the line between reality and imagination is sometimes thinner than we like to believe. Number 4. Social anxiety. Imagine standing in a room full of people and suddenly feeling like every single pair of eyes has locked onto you like security cameras. Your brain starts whispering helpful thoughts, like they're judging you. You walked weird. Why did you say that sentence like that? Congratulations, you've embarrassed yourself forever. Welcome to social anxiety. Humans evolved as extremely social creatures thousands of years ago. Being rejected by your group could literally mean death. No tribe meant no protection, no food, and eventually becoming a snack for something with teeth. So your brain developed a system specifically designed to monitor social threats. The problem in social anxiety disorder, that system becomes wildly overactive. Your brain starts treating ordinary social situations, conversations, presentations, meeting strangers as if you're about to be publicly exiled from the tribe. Your body reacts accordingly. Heart racing, hands sweating, thoughts spiral. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room is mostly thinking about what they're having for lunch. The irony is painful. People with social anxiety often care deeply about being polite, thoughtful, and not embarrassing themselves, which means their brain constantly runs simulations of every possible social mistake. Basically, your mind turns into a paranoid film director, producing a never-ending series of awkward scenes, starring you and the audience. Mostly imaginary. Your brain just forgot to cancel the premiere. Number 3. Narcissistic personality disorder. Every human has an ego, that little voice that says, "I'm pretty great actually." Now, imagine that voice turning the volume up to maximum and refusing to install a mute button. That's narcissistic personality disorder. People with this condition often appear extremely confident, charismatic, and self-assured. They crave admiration and recognition, and they may genuinely believe they are more talented, special, or important than everyone else. But here's the psychological twist. Underneath that inflated self-image is often extreme insecurity. The brain builds a giant psychological fortress of confidence to protect a fragile sense of self-worth. Compliments feel amazing. Criticism feels like a personal attack from a medieval catapult. The mind develops defense mechanisms, exaggerating achievements, seeking constant validation, and sometimes dismissing other people's feelings. It's not always intentional cruelty. It's often a protective strategy. Imagine a balloon that's been inflated too much. It looks impressive, but one small pin can cause a dramatic explosion. That's why narcissistic personalities can react strongly to even minor criticism. Their brain treats it like a threat to survival. So, the ego steps in like an overpaid bodyguard shouting, "Nope, we are perfect. Everyone else is wrong." Which means the personality becomes a carefully constructed confidence shield, very shiny, very loud, and slightly terrified of sharp objects. Number 2. Borderline personality disorder. Now imagine emotions that don't just fluctuate, they explode. Borderline personality disorder is one of the most emotionally intense psychological conditions. People with BPD often experience emotions with extreme depth and speed. A small conflict can feel like catastrophic rejection. A loving relationship can suddenly feel uncertain or threatening. It's like the emotional volume knob in the brain is permanently stuck on maximum. This can create powerful swings between idealizing someone you're the best person ever and suddenly feeling hurt or betrayed. You hate me and everyone leaves. Why does this happen? Part of it comes from an extremely sensitive emotional alarm system. Combined with difficulty regulating those feelings, the brain reacts quickly and struggles to calm down afterward. Imagine having emotional reactions that feel like thunderstorms. Instead of rain, every conflict feels enormous. Every fear of abandonment feels real and immediate. But here's the key point. People with BPD are not dramatic by choice. Their brain processes emotional signals with extraordinary intensity, which means relationships can feel like riding a speedboat through massive waves, beautiful moments, sudden storms, and an emotional engine that never quite slows down. Number 1. The human brain itself is the strange twist at the end of this list. Most mental disorders aren't caused by something completely foreign invading the brain. They're usually the result of normal human systems becoming extreme, misregulated, or stuck. Anxiety is a survival alarm turned to sensitive. Depression is an energy conservation system that won't switch off. OCD is an error-checking system trapped in a loop. AD is a curiosity engine with faulty brakes. In other words, the same brain mechanisms that help humans survive, explore, create, and cooperate can sometimes malfunction. Your brain is the most complex biological machine ever discovered. It runs trillions of calculations every second, manages memories, emotions, perception, language, and the entire experience of being alive. And like any complicated system, sometimes it glitches. That doesn't make someone broken. It just means the human operating system occasionally needs support, treatment, or recalibration. Because mental disorders aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that the most complicated machine in the universe is trying, sometimes awkwardly, to protect itself, which honestly explains a lot about humanity. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.